You're listening to the Galaxy Poet Podcast, a new digital platform centered around art, the creative process, and creative solutions to problems facing our world. I am your host, Jordan Ferreira. Let's begin. Welcome to episode 13 of the Galaxy Poet Podcast. I'm incredibly excited and proud to say that my guest today is one of the most iconic and influential drummers in modern history. His contributions to albums by artists such as D'Angelo, Me'shell N'degeocello, and Maxwell are some of the most iconic I've ever heard. And I think he's an incredibly talented and unique voice in what he does as an artist in his own right, as a multi-instrumentalist, as all these things. So I want to welcome the incredibly talented Chris Dave.
Hey man, thank you. And next time, make sure that intro is shorter.
I relate, man. I relate, but I genuinely feel like I believe all those things. I sincerely mean it. We were talking earlier about your work on D'Angelo's album, Black Messiah, which is one of my favorite albums, and I feel your presence on that album so heavily, and I feel like your influence. Beyond that album, just the stuff you've done with Chris Dave and the Drumheads and all the records that you've made, like, I feel your influence so heavily in the funk scene, the jazz scene, and I think it's amazing what you've been able to cultivate as a result of your unique voice. So I wanted to ask you, I wanted to ask you, like, where do you think your unique approach to rhythm came from? Like, where did that stem from for you?
Unique approach probably just came from my thirst of trying to, find my favorite drummer when I was younger. And then
Sure.
I started getting into different type of drums and drumming and drum styles, drum feels. And I guess I was just kind of like a combination of everything I was chasing, listening to, trying to study, transcribing. And just put it all in a big ball, and that's pretty much my personality.
Sure. So then at that time, were you kind of seeking, like, who were your big drum sort of heroes? Like, who were some people that stood out to you? Not even just drummers, could be anyone, you know?
Yeah, it was more like the fearlessness of the drums was always appealing, that it was the backbone to a lot of things that was happening. And I guess coming up, when I first started seeing instruments, I was in church with my mom and I was a little kid. So the first thing I could, actually touch was the drums and percussion at that point. So, it was like a chase it wasn't like one person, it was like a village of people.
Right.
Kind of helping me out. So I would probably just go with I had a teacher, Craig Green, and he was huge influential to me at a young age, as far as like just rudiments, practice, the way to study. And he was really hard on all his students, with love, but it was a good thing.
Yeah.
But that kind of crafted, I guess, this Houston sound we accidentally came up with.
Right. That's so cool. Do you think that environment of, like, coming up in the church kind of setting and playing and having all these musicians, like, at world-class level, like, caliber, do you think that really informed your sense of musicality and, like, your I guess your taste in, like, the caliber of musician and the kind of musician that you work with?
Yeah, churches, it teaches you a lot, playing in certain environments, how to play with the band, how to play with a vocalist, how to play with a choir, which later turns into how to play with a group, learning how to complement the music, take your ego out of it and just kind of play and let things play through you. It was a lot of things. And then you apply that later to groups or, performers or artists that you're with. Because one thing about church, it teaches you the ear. to listen. So that's very important when working with anyone.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think I've talked to a few people and I've played with musicians who come up in that kind of environment, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's it's a very unique, like it's a very unique way to learn an instrument and the craft of music and playing with other people. Like it's competitive, it seems like, but it
Yeah.
spawns like some of the greatest musicians I've ever heard and worked with, certainly.
Yeah, you're immediately in the fire pan when you're in church, So,
Yeah.
like, if something happens wrong, that could be totally embarrassing. And, like, we've all have stories of that. And the one time you try your new lick out because you practicing rhythms and stuff when you're super young and throw the whole church off. And, you know, you learn all
Definitely.
those through mistakes
Yeah.
as well, So if you
Sure.
don't fail, how would you grow?
That's true. That's something I don't hear very many people say, especially not your caliber certainly, but like that's huge. I feel like being okay with failing and being comfortable and turning a failure into something that you didn't expect and like something interesting. I
Hmm.
think that's an important thing to talk about. Does that do you relate to that in some way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's my complete style. So that's when you're like watching someone analyze kind of technically what you're doing, it's not from that standpoint sometimes.
Right.
So it'd be a whole different aspect of how people see what you do. And then it might be just a big, huge mistake for you, and someone else appreciate it. You're like, oh shit, okay.
Right. It was totally an error, but somebody else is like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." That sort of thing.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, still with the concept of what you're doing, but everything is not perfect. So if you think of it, if you go into it like that, it's much easier. Well, for me,
Sure.
like I'm just gonna try things and hopefully it works. But I'm not going in there like, oh yeah, this is gonna be the baddest shit you ever heard in your life, and wait till you hear it after this. You
Yeah.
always have that humbleness when you're playing and when other people hear it. So you don't assume, you just like grateful and happy that people appreciate it.
Yeah. That's a really healthy way to approach it, I think. I wanted to ask you because so much of the music that I heard when I was introduced to you is something that it seems to me like the influence on the music and just the artwork and like the song titles, like it seems to me there's an imagination that goes far beyond just like maybe watching drummers play and listening to drummers. Like feels like there's an influence and a vision there that's larger than the scope of just musicians. Like, is there an
Mhm.
artistic medium that you're inspired by that's like outside of music that people might be surprised to know like has informed you in your work?
Yeah, I'm just heavily right now kind of into art, and I was into it when I was younger. I can't draw, but I used to love going to museums, on tour. Anytime we have a day off and stuff like that, sneak in there and just kind of figure out how they were painting these things from just a blank canvas. It's kind of something like what I was trying to do through drums, but it's obviously more visual in art than music. But music is like an audible art for me.
Yeah.
So just that type of want to escape when you're in art or in the arts, that was always a part of it too. Like you just can't have your whole scope just be earth.
That's inspiring, man. I actually didn't know that about like your being interested in art early on, but I can feel it in the work. Like just looking at the artwork and being like, wow, that's incredible. It reminds me of like Salvador Dali, and then
Hmm.
and then you listen to the music obviously, and then you look at the track titles, and it's like there's a vision beyond just like being a great drummer, which is what I
Yeah.
appreciate.
Oh man, it's like if you could escape to an imaginary portal and just kind of stay there for a minute. That's kind of what we like to portray, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think the next 20 to 30 years, like in a post COVID, hopefully, situation is going to look like with like pop culture and music? Because it seems like all the directions, the direction that culture seems to be going in general is like very synthetic and very like very kind of programmed, very, you know, not live, this sort of thing.
Hmm.
And I feel like what you're doing is the stuff that I want to hear more of. And I feel like I have a feeling that maybe some of it, some of the pop culture will start going in that direction. But like, I'm curious to hear what you think. Where do you think this is all
I
heading?
think it will be a mesh of both. You know, like at some point you will get tired of. I guess it's your personality and character. So if you're tired of synthetic music, as you call it, you know, like you're gonna want to see people play live. You're
Yeah.
gonna want to feel something that makes you feel something inside, which can only come from like a group of musicians playing. Not only, but usually, you know,
Yeah.
because it's a lot of different energies being thrown at you, and you know all of that. But I could see a definite shift, and it's a lot of crazy musicians out there that are getting together, creating, writing songs, forming groups, perform. You know, the artist now is not as synthetic, uh, only because I can't really talk about it. But I've been working with a few artists the last few months that's coming out that are kind of big, but that I couldn't believe what they wanted. you
That's
know, as
inspiring.
far as that. So it was more of natural fills, drums, natural drums, and things like that, instead of looping and just play this for 8 bars and then we'll just loop it and we good. So all of that helps. I'm not gonna say that it would ever stop on the other side of the drum machine battling the drummer and stuff like that, but I think now it's gonna be a little more options for the live drummers and musicians coming up. Just like you said, some people have actually been practicing this whole time and writing and shedding in
Yeah.
this crazy ass time. Coming up with some. When you go through something tragic or crazy, usually you come up with something really, really creative.
Absolutely. And
You
I
know.
think it's incredibly inspiring to hear that, because that's exactly what I was that's the answer to the question that I was trying to find, like in general during this whole experience. Like,
Mm.
is this experience of like, you know, no music, no live shows, you can't really do anything other than, you know, go to work sometimes, right? And
Right.
you know, everything is more difficult. Like, do you have enough money to pay rent? Do you have enough money to
Exactly.
everybody's in survival mode. And I wondered, like, is this going to make people realize that maybe not that all pop music is superficial, but like superficial pop music is not the answer. Like, it's not,
Right.
you know what I
It's not
mean?
gonna solve your problems. Right.
Yeah. And I
And
think,
I think on musician side, owners, club owners, people that work there, and then the value of what the audience is spending their money on means more, because now you're not going to pay to go see something that you're not going to enjoy just off top, because you want to save your money, do something else. So that puts pressure on maybe people that were coasting for a while. Now, the younger musicians about to come in, there's other ideas. People are going to be creative. So if you're still pre-COVID thinking, then that's going to be, problem trying to retain interest.
yeah, I think that's a great point, man. And something I've never heard really said out loud before. Like, this whole experience is, I think, shifted obviously life in general,
Mm-hmm.
but it, I think, in terms of entertainment and the relationship between the two, like, I think it's changed the entertainment industry, because people, you know, expectations that people had, you know, executives, presidents, like all this stuff, label presidents,
Mm-hmm.
their expectation of what is going to work pre-COVID is completely different to post-COVID, you know?
Exactly. exactly. Which is lovely.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Switches everything up. So it's like now you don't necessarily need the biggest record label or push in the world for people to enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
You just have to be consistent and at least, I guess, good enough for people to keep their interest.
Yeah. Absolutely. For you though, I'm curious about like your creative process when you're working on something like a Drumheads album, for example. Like,
Mhm.
how does that start for you? Like, do you have musicians come in and you jam and then you kind of like arrange music that way, or do you start with grooves? Like, how does that work for you?
Man, we do every way possible.
Okay.
It could come with, I might have the whole song kind of in my head and have the parts on computers or whatever, or
Yeah.
write it out. Sometimes it could just be, hey, let's vibe today and come up with something with this type of vibe. And then once we get that, get to that point, we'll embellish and everything. Sometimes it can start with the lyrics. Sometimes it can start with a melody. Like it's no, you know, set way we do it every time. It's based off of like whatever you're inspired or kind of feeling at the time. Because it's all supposed to immediately evoke some type of emotion. That's all I want. So even if you hate it, as long as you hate it in the first 3 seconds, I'm cool. you know, just yeah, it's more of a. I guess when you're working with friends, it makes it a little different and fun. So it's more like we might talk conversation, and then all of a sudden that conversation sparks a melody or just sparks some words, which it can start from shit,
Yeah.
a hi hat, a shaker, it's beating on the table, spoon to the glass, like whatever we thinking of, or yeah, it's kind of cool at the same time because everyone in the group has their own projects as well. So everyone comes in more like with a producer mind. So you have like a lot of producer in my mind. I have a lot of producers in the group, and they're not really musicians. Like they are
Interesting.
musicians, but they mentally it's like think of your part and how it fits with us, and vice versa.
Right.
And it's like putting it together, but making sure it's no overflows and yeah.
Yeah. I could see how that would be a huge asset. Like, for anyone, just to know that there are musicians that are not only capable, but they're looking out for the whole picture as opposed to just like, I want to be able to play a solo, for the whole last half of the song.
Man, that takes up so much time. So yeah, or if you
Yeah.
really everybody's vibing, but if someone was soloing, not realizing that was the verse, that might mess up the vibe. So it's cool to just it's just everyone that just completely loves music and what they do. So it
Uh,
makes it just like fun. It's like asking you, how do you decide how do you walk in the morning? Do you start with the left foot or the right foot?
Right. I like that. Yeah. I think that's yeah, perfectly said metaphor, man. But I'm curious about, man, I'm curious about like when you say that everything is designed to evoke immediate emotion. I think there's a lot of musicians and like artists that are struggling with that, and I certainly relate. I would put myself in that category, just as like as a songwriter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that you could say that might be helpful to someone who's struggling with that idea of like making a work of art in any medium that's trying to be visceral and trying to be like, it's trying to evoke an emotion immediately? Like, are there any tips or like pieces of advice that you think could be valuable?
It's mostly like if you feel it and it's true, or it feels truthful to you, then someone else should be able to relate. So I always go with that approach. Like you just being honest from, you coming from a truthful place, then someone else has to relate. It might not be 80 billion people, but it won't be just one other person. So you
Right.
don't have to, even if you don't physically know these people, it's someone out there that relates to what you're saying, because why would you be so profound in thinking it and so confident in these thoughts, And if you believe in those thoughts, stand by them, because everyone's not going to like everything.
I love that. I yeah, I feel like that's something that's very valuable for artists to hear, and it's nice to be reminded of it, because
Yeah.
I feel like artists generally, they have this hope, and it may be like it may be a repressed hope, but it's like everyone will love everything they do, and you know what I mean? And
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
It does, and you get mad when they don't.
yes,
Man, I worked so hard on this one.
yes,
And they're like, yeah, go back to the other ones you played before. So yeah, we all been through that, but yeah, exactly. It's just because that person or group of people didn't like that project or whatever, someone else might still appreciate it. So it's all art. It's it's like what you're saying. It's like a painter. No one painter, everything he's ever done, you just want it.
yeah,
Some you just like, oh yeah, that's cool, but I like this one better. But of course, if you said that to the artist, they would be mad because they spent a lot of time on it, but it just didn't grab you like the other one. So that's what art does.
yeah,
Like
no,
you can have an opinion, it's okay.
yeah,
you
absolutely.
know, yeah,
What I mean, this I think this is an interesting segue, because what you're saying to me, like, I completely agree with, and I think it's the headspace that any artist should be approaching creativity.
mm,
But there's like a whole other component that I can only speak, I guess, from my own experience, but like I've certainly come up against it in just pursuing like work as a recording artist, as a solo artist, and all this stuff. But there's a boundary that's crossed where it's like, okay, people maybe start playing music because they love the craft, they love, being expressive and creative, and then there's the expectation of like selling, and there's people between those two boundaries that are like, well, to sell, you need to do this, or you need to think like this, or work with this producer or writer. Is there something you could say that maybe would help someone navigate that space? Because it can be quite confusing, I feel like, in my
yeah,
opinion.
man, that's a hard space. It's more of you have to decide what you're doing it for first. So if you're an artist and you're in it to make money, and a lot of money, then you probably have to play certain games and stuff like that because you're in their game. If you're like an artist, then you're really thinking about the art. So you kind of want to be smart on both sides, though. Like you definitely want to know all the business aspects of what's going on just with yourself and your team, and how it would work with a major label, or people that are trying to push you and give you money and all that. But you got to remember, when someone gives you money, they expect something back as well.
Yeah.
So if you are cool with that, that's a route you could take. If you cool with kind of always controlling your things, owning your things, that's a little harder route. But the benefits are better in the long run. So some people don't like to work hard. So, or finding all those different pieces what you need. So a major label will help you with that. But then if you really kind of into what you're doing and how it wants to be perceived and all those type of things, you'd be more hands-on. So it's no one way for anyone,
Right.
because then if it was, everyone would take that way, I think.
Yeah. It's true, man.
Yeah.
I wish, yeah, I wish that was said more to young artists, because certainly, I mean, for me, like, no, I wasn't aware of that on any level as a 16-year-old, like signing, signing a record deal, and like
Exactly.
my expectation of like of creativity and the intersection between business and creativity was like, okay, just be a great artist, and and then
It'll
success.
come.
Exactly. And that's not true. That's not true.
That's true. Yeah, because everyone that's invested has ideas as well of why they even invested. So it's more of, well, I want you to do this. Well, I need you to do a song like this, and then this person's pulling you this way. This person, so you might end up making a lot of money, but you might not enjoy a lot of the songs you have to sing for the next 20 years.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
It it's interesting when you say that, because I feel like, certainly just something I've noticed is like so much of those things of like maybe people putting up money for you to do creative projects, the motivation is not business or like even making money. It's just like, oh, I selfishly like this, and I just want to see someone like you sing it. It's like
right.
it's like ego and insecurity and like all these weird things, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there something that someone like you who's worked on all these incredible records, and you played on 21, I think it was, from Adele, and that record is amazing. Like we said, Me'shell N'degeocello, Maxwell. Is there
Hmm.
something that you could impart with to younger artists, musicians, that could help them navigate that space of like maybe some of the mind game stuff that goes on in the entertainment industry, and like, kind of like what you're saying, being aware of why you do certain things, and like could help them sort of make decisions that may impact, the course of their careers or something like this.
Yeah, it's more of being aware and just kind of, I guess, looking at the surroundings of what you want to be a part of. You know, so for a younger artist, everyone wants to make the best music and tour and be able to play shows and things like that. But like now, because of this new whatever way of the world is going, it's not really safe to say what's going to happen in the next few years. So if I was a younger artist, I'll be trying to get with everyone, that's not signed, and trying to figure out what you guys can do together, you know, or complement each other, or just, figure out other ways besides going through like the same routes all the time. Because there's so many more opportunities now, and people take advantage of those. So I would definitely not limit your options to anything someone has told you in the past. That's what I would say.
That's great advice. And what are some of those alternative models, like, what would an alternative model be that you'd recommend for that? Is that like the YouTube kind of route of trying to generate like subscriber bases and all that stuff?
I mean, you could like just do a show on your channel or your Instagram or your Twitch or your, whatever. If something is appealing and people can feel it, all of a sudden now I think it just gets more visible watches. And, not that you're trying to have the most streams, you're just trying to be seen because, everybody wants to be heard at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's just, you want to figure out a way to build your own fan base from the ground up, which is kind of, that's the route I went. I knew it was going to be long and hard, but I didn't care.
Wow, man.
Because, those people are with you.
Yes.
Even if it's 20 people, at least every time you perform, you have 20 people. You can count on
Yeah.
it. So, and then once you get 21, you just hype. You get 22, you looking at it like cool, it's growing.
Yeah.
You know, Don't go into it like, oh man, I don't have 1 million followers. I suck. You know, because the way the media in the world looks at things, it'll have you tripping and thinking you're not as comfortable as you are in your own craft.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's so important, man. Because I feel like now, if anything, that's, certainly pre-COVID, but now as well, like, I see more and more of that, where these musicians, these artists that I love so much, you see for whatever reason, like culturally, there's not a spotlight being shown on it. And you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
man, that person's a genius. Like, why no love? Like, why not 1 million Instagram followers,
Right. Yeah. So you can't get caught up in any of that. Just go with what you love and like and believe in, and the options you want to take. It's like Instagram. You can follow anyone you want. You can unfollow anyone you want. It's how you set up your perception of what you want to deal with the world every day.
Yeah. That's an incredible, it's an incredible way of looking at it. And it's true. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking a little bit earlier about like some of the music that you were listening to, and some of like, you mentioned documentaries and like some stuff that's been inspiring to you during the pandemic. Like, are there any specific documentaries that have been really like inspiring to you?
What's the last one we watched? Well, yeah, actually, I haven't seen it in a while, but it was when Bob Marley. It wasn't even a documentary. It was just a concert. Bob Marley first time in the U.S.
Wow, I haven't seen
And
that one.
yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like Dick Gregory was the opening act, if you
Wow,
will.
that's a show. Damn.
Yeah, and then it's like they played during the day, so it
Wow.
wasn't even a nighttime concert. It was the illest shit I ever seen.
What year was it? Do you know? That sounds amazing.
Oh man, hold on. I could tell you. I'll tell you after this. I'll tell you the exact. Well, it's on YouTube
I need to watch that. That
now.
sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Is there something about documentaries that's like especially inspiring? Seeing like the course of someone's career and choices they made, that kind of like the motivation sort of is more intense than other things like concert films or something like that.
Yeah, the documentaries, it shows like all the other factors that might attribute to the way they think, the character, their personality, their whole style, vibe, how they have friends, the friends they chose to hang around with, parent relationships. There's like so much stuff you can find out in a documentary that you just won't see on stage, because stage is for some people alter ego or outlet or a character,
Right.
so you don't really know what you're looking at sometimes, but a documentary kind of takes the mask off, and you can just kind of see what you're dealing with. That's why. So
That I love that. I think that's so true. Like those things that you mentioned, like relationships with parents and the friends that they chose and like choices they made. In that way, that inspires, or that kind of dictates and charts the course of their creativity more than a musician
yeah,
that they love.
exactly.
That's such a good
Yeah,
point, man. Yeah,
yeah, because is who is around you all the time, or vice versa, because you will be influenced by those people as well as your favorite musician or someone you might not even know.
yeah,
But the people you're going to be influenced by them as well.
yeah, and probably unconsciously, right? Probably not even aware.
Unconsciously. Yeah. Yeah. You know,
Wow, that's
feels
that's
the
a
same.
that's a great thing to be aware of, for sure, and that inspires me to just like make a list of all my favorite musicians and watch documentaries of that, because
Yeah.
that's pretty cool, man.
Fun.
Are there any like I know you mentioned the painting and like the art scene, that's an inspiring part to you, or was it, at one time, for sure? Is there any like filmmaking? Is that some inspiring thing for you?
Yeah, I actually did. Dang, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about it, but I did something uh, with Robbie Robertson, who works closely with Martin Scorsese. So, yes.
That's pretty amazing.
That's all I can say.
Martin Scorsese is pretty amazing. It
But man,
reminds. I'm sure you've seen Birdman, right?
yes,
It's a pretty amazing score. Pretty amazing.
yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, filmmaking is a big thing. My wife is into that as well, like heavily. So I'm always asking her questions and stuff like that. Just watching it from a whole different perspective. Because behind the camera looks way different pre-production.
Oh, interesting.
You know, so it's just cool learning angles and all. I always apply it to music some kind of weird way.
That's
You know.
cool. See, that's the sense I get from your music, and like from the very first time I really was introduced to you and your music, like just seeing, like I said, the artwork and being like, wow, this guy's it's more than just being a great drummer, because there's a lot of great musicians, but there's a vision here. There's like something exciting and like compelling about what he's doing, and I feel like that's what makes, every time there's a new record or a new project, I'm like, oh, I have to hear it because I'm on board with that vision. Like I love the whole aesthetic and I love everything.
Oh, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Of course, man. So yeah, I mean, I think well, I'm of course, like I would indulge, or I'd encourage anyone to like check out all the stuff that Chris has been a part of if you're not familiar. Of course, he's been involved with some big pop artists and things like Maxwell and D'Angelo. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, what, as far as upcoming like solo projects, stuff that you're spearheading,
Oh yeah, you go right to Bandcamp,
Bandcamp.
and I put like latest one was called Thine People, and it's up now. It's crazy artwork, and it was one maybe 2 months before that called Cuffing Season,
It's a great title.
and then I
Wow.
also did one with Daniel Crawford, who recently won an Oscar. He's a drumhead as well, and
Wow.
we did one called Smoke Break. And you
It's a
can
great
find all
title.
those on you can find all those on Bandcamp. Chris Dave.
Is that the predominant way you're releasing music these days? Like just exclusively Bandcamp?
At first, and then it's like a couple of weeks later, it's on all platforms. So I think it should be everywhere. The first few now, but yeah, it was just a cool way. I like people that support artists, artists in any way, and a lot of people put music out for that for years on
Yeah.
Bandcamp. It's crazy music on there, but
Yeah.
of course, it's not as huge as other platforms. But the people make the platform.
Yeah. And I think the artists retain like more through Bandcamp, right, than any other
Yeah,
platform.
than any other platform. Yeah, like if they were a label, everyone would be trying to get signed to them over everyone else.
It's a great way of putting it. So yeah, man,
Yeah.
I think that's inspiring, and I just want to encourage anyone to go check out like all the stuff you put out there and everywhere else. And this was really inspiring. I want to say thank you again for taking the time to do this.
Oh man, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was awesome, man. Be safe, and hope to see you perform soon, man.
Hey, you be safe too. Thank you for
Cool.
this once again.
Thanks, man. Yeah, see you.
All right.